All right, thanks again for joining us, everyone. I'm Eric Nordlander. I'm one of the GPs here at Google Ventures, and I lead our New York office. I'm really excited to be here today with Zach Lloyd. Zach is one of the founders that I work closely with. He was a principal engineer at Google, worked on Google Sheets for many years, was the CTO of Time Magazine, and founded another startup before coming to Warp. So we're definitely going to get into the applied layer of AI, which I think will be the most of what we'll talk about. But let's go back to the beginning. So I first partnered with Zach back in April 2020. And if any of you remember what was going on then, there's not much going on in the world. It was a pretty chill time. And it was certainly the first deal that I did in lockdown over video, even though we'd spent a lot of time together prior to that. But AI was not a thing, or certainly LLMs were not a thing at that point. So maybe let's go back to that moment and talk about the beginning of Warp and the vision that you had, and then we can get to where it is today with a lot more capabilities.
Cool. Excited to be here. Thank you for having me. So the original idea for Warp, as you remember, was there's a tool that developers use called the terminal, it's an everyday tool for most developers. It is the big black screen with the green text. It's where you can kind of run any developer app, something that really hadn't changed in the last 40 years, something I'd used my entire career. It's a thing where if you master it as a developer, you can get you can get a lot more done. And I always worked with engineers who were really awesome at it. I wasn't that. And so the idea was, can you build a much more accessible and powerful command line experience? Can you build a collaboration platform around it? That was the original vision, what we were working on with Warp.
And so fast forward to today, Warp is a lot more than just a terminal. It's a way to, control many different systems in production, to generate code, to build systems, and I think we're calling it the Agentic development environment.
Yeah, we literally don't call it a terminal anymore, even though it is. You can use it as a terminal, but the basic vision of Warp today is that it's an interface for telling your computer what to do. And so like the basic interface of a terminal was you would type in terminal commands, and those would be like in computer language. And that same interface actually works super well for launching agents. So the primary thing you do in Warp today is you type in English, or you even just talk to Warp and say, okay, I want you to code something for me. I want you to debug a production issue. I want you to set up a new project. And it literally could be anything because of where in the stack the tool is and what types of things you can do from the terminal. So I think kind of by a stroke of luck, the interface that we spent all this time trying to improve actually ends up being an incredible place to, like, as a developer, launch and run agents. And that's what the product is today.
Absolutely. And so we just finished hearing about all the amazing things that foundation models can do from the other Zach. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on at the coding layer, right? I mean, coding is probably the most exciting application of foundation models, at least in my opinion. What's going on there? Like, how are you leveraging them? What's good? What's bad? What's exciting?
Yeah. So I guess the rate of change is very, very high, to say one thing. I would say over the past year, you've seen a couple phases of what coding models can do, and sort of the first real area where I think there was strong product market fit was in tools like Cursor, where you got great completions. So you would be in the IDE, which is like the file editing tool. You start typing code, and the model seems to read your mind, and it finishes your thought for you. I think today, and even just really like in the last couple months, you're seeing the transition to a more agentic style of coding, where you don't even need the file editor to be your primary interface. In fact, I think the file editing experience is going to become less and less important. Instead, what you do as a developer is you write a prompt, and you specify a bunch of context that you think is important for the agent to solve the problem. You hit enter, and the agent starts solving it for you. And you see this in tools like Claude Code or Gemini CLI. This is what Warp does also, just like one layer up in the stack. And that's like where we're at today. I think where we're going is that you're going to need less and less human intent to even launch these tasks. And you're going to start to have system events that trigger them for you. And so this would be like, oh, a crash has been detected through your crash reporting system. Let's have an agent try and fix that. Or a user has filed an issue about like a misalignment in the UI, and it will start to fix it for you. So I think those are kind of the 3 stages, and we're in that middle stage right now where it's just getting good enough where you can do a lot of real tasks by prompting. And we're now largely developing Warp with this new style of coding, which is a big culture shift and shift in the way of working, but it's very powerful.
And so I'm guessing like as these models get better, you're getting better at building Warp. And so, can you share some of the models that you're using? And like, is there a room for a bunch of different models, or how does this work?
Yeah, so there's different philosophies around this. So in Warp itself, users can choose actually from a variety of models. We default today to the models from Anthropic, specifically Claude, Sonnet, and Opus. We have a whole setup internally where we eval all the models and have found that those are at the frontier for doing coding right now. That could change. It's actually an interesting thing for us, like giving users that optionality. I think if you're like a business that's evaluating these tools, I don't know how you think about like, do you want to bet on one model provider? Do you want something that lets you pick? But Warp's position in the stack is that we give users a choice, but we try to default it to what the best thing is today, state of the art, and that's Claude. Gemini has some interesting pros. It has a very large context window, is good for certain things, and the OpenAI models are good for certain things too. We also architected so that we use different models for different types of tasks. So sometimes you want like it's fine to have a high latency, very expensive reasoning model. Sometimes it's better to have like a very low latency, fast model for classifying something. So we try and be intelligent here.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned there's sort of these 3 stages of how models are being leveraged. Starting with this kind of autocomplete, which is if you're using Cursor, that's a very familiar modality.
Yep.
We're kind of already moving into phase 2. What do you think the sort of next or a few phases forward? What do you think that actually looks like for a senior engineer?
Yeah. So I think it's more of a cloud model, and it's more of a system event model. So maybe closer to like Devin or OpenAI Codex. I think at today's like model capability level, you can only do sort of very minimal types of tasks. So you can do like small UI fixes. I think that those tasks are going to be more complicated, and what you're going to see is the models can run autonomously for longer and need less and less human intervention. And when that's the case, it's going to no longer make sense to have these things be local and be babysat all the time. But you are still going to have a lot of cases where, I don't know, it's just like a developer needs to express their intent in a way that's going to actually accomplish some fairly complicated thing. And so I don't think the richer prompting is going to go away, but I do think you're going to have more agents, more in the cloud, and the developer's job is going to become more of like a kind of conductor or orchestrator or tech lead for a set of agents, where they are providing context and guidance and then stepping in to correct when an agent hits a wall.
Yeah, maybe it's interesting to go a level deeper on that role of the engineer. And so certainly, when I'm vibe coding today or whatever you want to call it, and I know you don't like that term.
I don't like the vibe coding term at all for pro developers.
Yeah. I think one of the things, if I just say, hey, make me an app, like I might just get something very simple, but as soon as we're dealing with external APIs or storage, like obviously you're going to hit some rough edges pretty quickly. And so it feels like right now the job of the engineer is providing like a robust prompt with lots of detail and richness. And it sounds like you think that's going to continue, or how do you think their role is going to evolve as maybe they can take on more and more abstract tasks?
Yeah, so if you're an engineer using one of these tools today, say you're using Claude Code or Warp, there's a huge variance in the quality of what you can get done and how quickly you can do it based on what context the model has available. And so that context can come from a developer being really good at prompting it. It also comes from like what systems does it have available? Like, does it have MCP servers? Does it have rules? Does it understand your coding conventions? I think the context is going to become more readily available. And I think developers are going to increasingly be like doing things which, hopefully are more interesting and less about doing rote work and more about systems architecture and sort of thinking through how the big pieces of systems can fit together. And so I think that's how it's going to change, basically.
Yeah.
Less, and you're going to be very, very rarely like writing code or writing terminal commands.
Yep. No, that makes a ton of sense.
Yep.
And we have a lot of founders here in the audience, and I think one of the big questions has been, how do your own teams shift? And obviously, you're using this technology inside of Warp. So, how do you see your team evolving over time? How do you see your customers' teams evolving?
Yeah, so it's an interesting state right now where I found at Warp, it's the more senior engineers tend to be more reluctant to adopt the new way of working. I think there's a good reason for that in that, if you are a senior engineer, you've been doing the job for a long time, you're actually probably more efficient. If you're brand new to engineering, or maybe you don't even know how to engineer at all, it takes building apps from the realm of like impossible to possible. Whereas if you're a senior engineer, it's like it might just save you a little time, or it might actually do something that you perceive of as like really dumb, or create bad code, or just you feel like it's like kind of like taking away the fun of like what you like doing. So from the standpoint of like being an engineering manager, there's this challenge of like how do you get developers to embrace this thing which will actually help the business ship faster if they adopt it. And so, the types of things that I'm telling developers on my team is like that there is actually a lot of fun in this. It's kind of a new type of game, a new type of puzzle. Like I do find a lot of joy when I can actually guide an agent to do the coding task for me. I'm inherently pretty lazy, so I actually like things that, I don't love typing code. I would much rather just like focus on what I'm shipping. And so you can do that. And then when we go and talk to enterprises, this is actually a very, very common question of like, the enterprise might have like deployed Cursor to everyone or might have deployed Cloud Code. And it's like, they might have really horrible uptake of it because they don't know how to get the engineering team to embrace what is fundamentally a different style of working that they've been doing for their whole career. And so having a big education component and like changing the mindset of what software engineering is from being all about like coding to being all about like using these new tools to shift software, I think is the key kind of mindset shift that has to happen.
Yeah, no, it's a big change.
Yep.
And just curious, are you seeing that in roles other than software engineering, like in product management or other functions inside of your business?
So we try to use AI tools for everything at this point, and we try to use them. We use them a lot in like data analysis. We use them a lot in sales in terms of like understanding, like trying different messaging. We use it in terms of marketing, and generally, I think generally people are excited to try these tools. Developers, it's really at the bleeding edge because I think that the LLMs have the most product market fit that I've seen with developers, and it feels the most like, whoa, this is doing my job.
Right. And part of that amazing fit that coding LLMs have had with their users has made the landscape super competitive, right?
So competitive.
And the amount of revenue that some of these companies are generating is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So how do you think about, for your users, how do you think about retaining users and loyalty when these things are changing so quickly?
Yeah, so I think about it honestly the same way I've always thought about building product, which is like try to build the thing that solves the user's problem in the best possible way. At Warp, we're trying to build something that's differentiated, which I think actually we have a cool angle on. Like most of the coding tools in the market are either in the IDE, specifically in like a fork of VS Code, and all feel basically the same. They have a chat panel, or they are CLI apps. And so for Warp, we have a totally different spot in the stack where we are basically this like thing that kind of looks and feels like a terminal, but is really an agent platform, and there's nothing else like it. So for us, it's like we build differentiated value. Are we different than the other things that people are using? Are we building for the actual new workflow rather than bolting things on to existing tools, which came up in the last conversation? Like, I think you really want to rethink the interface from like foundational principles for the new workflow. Well, I'll tell you what we're not trying to do is compete on cost. Like I think we will lose if we do that because we just have so much competition from, like I'll say Google Gemini can give away so many requests. We have to compete on the product itself. And then we have to find ways where people want to stick with it. And so for us, that's things like, the more Warp learns your company's context, for instance, the more it's hooked up to their MCPs, the more people put their knowledge into it, the stickier of a product it becomes. Now, we're not trying to create lock-in, but we are trying to create sort of lasting value and really like, honestly, like developer love. like developers are still the ones who are by and large picking these tools at companies is what we find. And so having something where it's like a high NPS product where people are like, oh my God, I use this thing and it saved me 10 hours of doing this horrible part of my job that I didn't want to do. For Warp also, Warp is not just like a coding agent, it also does things across the entire development lifecycle, which is a really big deal. So it does like, you know, if you're in a firefight and you're like, I don't know how to G-Cloud, dash, whatever, like you can just tell Warp to do it. So looking for areas where we can differentiate, where we can focus, and where we can like really stand out from the competition is important.
Right, and we heard in the last talk about how important benchmarking is for all these models. And yeah, in terms of having a high NPS product, it doesn't hurt that Warp is actually #1 on Terminal Bench, and I think top 5 on SWE-bench. And you know that's a lot when your competition is Anthropic and Google and OpenAI and everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, what did it take to maintain those benchmarks? And are those the right benchmarks? Like, it's obviously great that you're on top, but are those the right things to measure?
I think they matter. So I guess for anyone who's building on AI, building on top LLMs, I think it's just important to measure at our layer as it is at the model layer. And so actually Warp's AI product got dramatically better once we got into the mindset of like, we're going to run all these evals, we're going to see where we actually stand, and then we're going to try to improve off them. And then we're going to build our own evals, and we're going to also do things, you know, looking at actual like user data and telemetry to try to continuously improve. Because there is a lot of differentiated value in how you provide context and how you prompt these models, how you use different models for different things. And it's just such a different way of programming than what I'm used to. Like, I'm used to like, you know, you build a feature, you do a bug bash, you push it out, are there crash reports for it? Whereas with this, there's this stochastic nature to it where it's really hard to verify that it's going to work in everyone's use case unless you measure it. And then as far as like how we did so well on these benchmarks, some of it comes down to just like where we sit in the stack. So for instance, like on Terminal Bench, we're the only app out there that is a terminal. And so we can, like one of the Terminal Bench tasks is like playing Zork or something. And so because we are the terminal itself, we can observe what's going on in every terminal app. It's kind of like the relation of the browser to a web page. And so that just gives us power to do more of these tasks that some of these other tools that are at different layers in the stack have a hard time doing.
Awesome. Yeah. I just want to mention for the audience, we're going to have time for a couple of audience questions. I'll ask you one last thing,
Sure.
and then we'll jump to the audience. So yeah, I think it's always interesting. You know, we've been through a crazy amount of change in this industry. I mean, LLMs are what? I mean, the sort of, you know, big LLMs are maybe 3 years old, barely.
That's crazy.
We're talking about this the last time we were on a panel together, that vibe coding as a term is only like 5 months old. Yeah. You know, it sounds like that's something we've been talking about forever. So maybe let's try to look a little bit further into the future. So maybe the end of the decade, like 2030. Like, what do you think? What do you think is going to be going on at that point? Like
2030.
Yeah. I mean, do engineers even exist? Like, what is Warp going to be doing?
2030, I have no idea. Like, I guess what I really macro, what I think is like, there's going to be a lot more software built. I'm pretty confident in that there is sort of, you used this phrase to me once, there's like infinite demand for software in the world. And what's happening is that the cost of producing great software is going way down, and the barriers to entry to building great software are going way down. Like, I did a coding live stream with my dad, where I was like, I think my dad could now build some software, which is pretty cool.
That's amazing.
And so there isn't like a business in the world that isn't a software business at this point. And so that one prediction I feel very confident is like, there's going to be more and hopefully better software. I don't totally know how it's going to be produced. My hope is that the, you know, like the more annoying menial parts of software development are just kind of done. And it's like we've all moved up one level of abstraction, just sort of like how it was from assembler to regular languages, from regular languages to like just whatever the purest expression of intent is that can be communicated to an LLM is how software gets built. But then it's like people doing still creative problem solving and building, you know, things that are valuable to the economy and just fun apps also.
I definitely agree. There's gonna be a lot more software.
Yeah.
So let's see. Do we have any questions from the audience? Let's see. Graham's got a mic. So.
Hi. When a new model comes up, how do you guys evaluate how good that model is for your product?
Oh, amazing question. This is top of mind for us right now. So we basically run it through our evals. So we run it against Sweetbench, we run it against Tbench, and then we run it against all of our sort of internal evals. It's not quite as simple as that because these models, their performance is dependent a little bit on the prompt and the context, and they have different characteristics. They might have different context window lengths. So we have to do some amount of tuning. But generally, what we're trying to get to is a point where a new model comes out, like Grok 4 comes out, and they're claiming whatever, and like we want to see, does this actually, for the use cases that our users care about, does it help them compared to like the Anthropic models or Gemini? So we've gotten pretty good at this now, which is cool.
Hey, thanks for a great panel. I've been trying Warp. It's phenomenal. It's going great. Really impressed. I'm curious for your perspective on how you see making, the traditional developer's terminal more accessible to an audience with language models versus perhaps accelerating the traditional terminal itself with something like autocomplete.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, so the first couple years of Warp were really all about the first thing there. I will say for Warp specifically, we are very much on the like pro developer side of things, just because the terminal itself tends to be a kind of intimidating tool for non-developers. Although we are seeing more and more, like I'm really surprised actually. We have people who are like, I've never coded before and I'm using Warp to build stuff. So it is possible, but I don't know if it would be my first choice as a tool as a non-developer to download like something that looks like a terminal. But to answer your question, we're much more in on the agentic side than we are on like the terminal acceleration side at this point, just because I feel like it goes back to that question of like, how do you raise the abstraction level? And I think what really matters is expressing your intent in English rather than like crafting the perfect command. But we have a lot of users who like it because it's like, it lets you work faster in the terminal if you want. And that's cool too.
Right, we got over here.
Hi there. I have a question. So you basically described something that's happening right now with all these products like Cloud Code. The engineer is basically becoming a prompt engineer. And this is going to be more and more evident in the years to come. Does this create any risks that 5-10 years down the road that all the skills that the senior engineers need to have today, which is understand data structures, understand the stack, understand the optimization, understand what needs to go to production, they're not going to be as relevant in 5-10 years from now. Therefore, when products are being built by agents, people won't even know what's suboptimal or buggy or what needs to change from a mock-up product to even go to production and serve millions of users.
Do you want me to take this or you have a take? I can take it.
You start, and I definitely have some.
I think this is a real risk.
Yeah.
Even now, I think that it's very easy as a developer to build something without knowing what you're doing, and that leads to real problems in production where, the models are limited in their capabilities, and sometimes you really need to understand what you're doing, or something's going to go very, very wrong. I think that I saw something on Replit deleted someone's database. Did you see the story? So I think at least today, even today, I'd say it's a really big concern. I think I can just tell you how we approach this internally at Warp when engineering with these things, which is that as an engineer today at Warp, you are responsible for all code that gets submitted for review, and we still view it as an assist. So if you send a PR to someone, you better understand the code as though you wrote it. I don't know if that's going to be workable in the long term, but that's where we're at today. And then the other thing that we ask engineers to do at Warp is we ask them to tell the agent not just what they want built, but how to build it. And I think that's a really important distinction at this point is if you're building something, you should specify what data structure you want the API to look like, what you want the data flow through it to look like. And so those things do mitigate this a bit when it comes to professional software development. But long term, I do think this is a real problem, and I don't know the answer. I'm curious, Eric, if you have a take.
I mean, I think it's both a problem, and I think it's a problem if there becomes like a skill gap, if we sort of lose everyone who understands how to write code, for instance, like I don't think that's really going to happen, but that would be an issue.
Yeah.
But I do think part of it is just our whole software engineering landscape is not really set up for fully machine generated. Like it doesn't tolerate it in a way. Like we actually want a human to read a whole PR and understand it.
Yep.
Like that's like a requirement that we're imposing because we don't fully trust these systems. I think about like, showing my age here, but thinking about some of the first programs I wrote, I had to worry about, sometimes like register allocations or like, memory segments and things like that. Like no one thinks about that anymore, like for the most part, or very, very low level engineers do. And we sort of trust each layer of the stack. And we've just gotten into this world. And so I feel like all of our systems and tools are not made to accommodate like an engineer producing 1,000x more code. But we're going to get there, and we're just going to have to evolve. I think tools like Warp are actually really well placed to sort of handle that output and manage it in a different way. But yeah, I certainly don't think we'll be in a place where humans are reviewing all code that's committed, right? Like this just doesn't seem feasible. But we have to build systems that we trust that allow us to get to that point.
Yeah, one of the interesting things we're building in Warp right now is a code review, but it's human reviewing agent code. So it's like, what's the right interface for that? Which I feel pretty strongly is not like the GitHub PR review in a web app interface. And so I think it's like, what is PR, like what does reviewing an agent's code look like? How do you make sure that the code an agent produces doesn't have security holes? Which I think is like another big concern. And so there's all this missing infrastructure for this, and also I think education, because it's all just changing on the fly so quickly. So I agree with that. Yeah, that's a good question.
So maybe we'll do one more question and then we'll break.
Yeah, thanks so much. I was curious, you talked about how different teams are changing and evolving. Are you seeing faster uptake with certain size companies or certain sectors? I assume less regulated sectors, but would love to hear.
Yeah. It's really interesting. There's a big variance. Like we talked to, I think it depends. Like some companies really, really take this seriously and are like top-down mandate, like get AI tools out there. And I talked to a company yesterday where they have like a person who's in the specific role around like encouraging AI developer tool adoption, and they have 1,500 engineers. And he was like, we have pretty much 100% adoption on AI tools. And we have AI tools that are running in our CI/CD every night producing PRs. So that's one. And then I talked to another company, which is the exact same size, where they're like, our engineers don't like using it, and it's not really getting adoption. It doesn't work well on our code base. And so they're very tentative. They're very security conscious around like the code base leaking. And so I see a big variance. It does seem to me to be like a top-down culture thing. I think a really good signal that you're gonna get a lot of adoption is like, does the company have a person whose like mandate is like AI developer tool adoption? Because that's a common thing I've seen places now, and they get way better adoption. But I've seen a variance. And it's not necessarily even regulated. Like these were both, like the one that had all the adoption was a public company. The one that didn't was still like a private late stage startup. And so it was pretty interesting to me.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, Zach, for a super interesting panel. And thank you all of us for joining. Please stick around for a bit. We've got plenty of drinks and snacks outside, and I'm sure we'll have time to continue the conversation.
Cool, thanks.